From the Woodpeckers studio in the great state of New Hampshire, welcome to the Sounds Like a Search and Rescue podcast, where we discuss all things related to hiking and search and rescue in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Here are your hosts, Mike and Stomp.
I am rolling.
So episode 86, I'm cracking a beer. Let's get this over with so I can get back to watching my earwax removal videos on YouTube. Let's go.
What? No. Are you serious? Are you trying like the honeycomb?
No. I just like watching these British guys. They like have the little instruments where they pick at the earwax off people's ears.
It's a very dangerous procedure.
Oh, it's so fascinating. It's so satisfying when they pull the big hunk of wax out of people's ears.
Oh, it's nasty. Do you struggle with that, Steve? I struggle with it. Every year I got to get my ears de-waxed. They'll pull out a big, like, pinky-sized glob of wax. Like, disgusting. I think it's because of the loud music.
Oh, my God. You're grosser than even normal. Usually you're gross, but now you're even grosser.
I don't know about struggle with it, but usually before I go backpacking, because I'll sleep with earplugs in, I'll use one of those, like, sort of like a syringe, but it's like a plunger kind of thing, and you just use it and push warm water in, and that pushes everything out.
You're disgusting too.
No, it's so worth it though. It's so worth it because then I don't wake up in the morning and pull my earplugs out and I can actually hear.
It is. I might retire early and become one of those. They're called audiologists. So they like go and they use like a little vacuum sucker and they'll suck all the earwax out. It's really good. I'll post some videos on the show notes.
Oh, we'd love to see that. We can do the Instagram reel of your earwax removal.
It seems to be big awesome in Britain. I don't know what it is, but all the people that do the YouTube videos are all from Britain. So I don't know. Maybe it's a diet or I don't know.
Got me.
All right. How did we get into earwax discussion, Stomp? This is a goddamn hiking
That was
show.
100% you. That was unscripted, Mike.
It was.
Right there.
It was. Just popped into my head. So, Stomp, this is the last episode for 2022, I think. Right?
Yes, it is. Yep. So, before we get into that, we'll bang out a couple sponsors here. CS Instant Coffee, zero waste instant coffee that comes in compostable packets, perfect for the trail and home. Check them out by going to the link in our show notes at CS Instant Coffee, instant.coffee. And then at Vaucluse Gear, back sweat sucks in all types of weather and hikes. Not only is it uncomfortable, sweat is a risk factor, causing your core temperature to fluctuate if it doesn't evaporate off your back. Check out Vaucluse's Cool Dry Backpack Airflow Frame. Fits pack size 18 liters up to 65 and creates a nice gap between your pack and your body for warm and cold temps. So you can check them out at vauclusegear.com. And of course, if you want a sticker, you can head down to Ski Fanatics right here on exit 28 off of 93, right in the lovely town of Campton.
Yeah, I'll take a look at the sticker spreadsheet and send out another batch before the holidays too. So get your name on that. The link is in the show notes if you want a sticker. I think we're running out, Stomp. I got to get a new batch.
I have about, I don't know, I've got a bag here of about maybe, 75?
Yeah, I got around the same, so.
Something like that. Yeah, getting low.
Yeah. All right, Stomp. So you were, the Instagram was a buzz this weekend with some of the content that you put on there. So for anybody who wasn't paying attention, definitely follow our Instagram. I think it's, what is it, SLASR Podcast on Instagram?
I believe so. Yeah, I'd have to ask Steve because I don't pay attention to these things.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're SLASR on Instagram.
You're the only adult in the room at the moment. Yeah, SLASR Podcast.
Yeah. It's at SLASR Podcast, I think. SLASR. But Stomp put on this, like, he's got a Tacoma, which is a pretty good sized pickup truck, but he posted a picture of this Christmas tree in the back of the Tacoma, and the Tacomas have like a smaller bed because you have a dual cab, so there's not that much room. But
right.
How big was this?
Right.
You got like a 20-foot Christmas tree, right?
Actually, it topped out at 16 feet.
16 feet.
According to Papa Stomp, he measured it standing with a tape measure from the deck, though, so I don't know how accurate that is. I'm guessing 20 because if you're up on the second floor master bedroom, it goes past the height of the window, so I'm guessing it's probably 20. It's 10 feet, 10 feet wide at the base. And we've always, like several years ago, we just started putting them on the deck because the cats are just crazy. So it just made sense. And it was actually really pretty once the snow starts falling. So, yeah, there it is.
I think it's a brilliant idea.
Do you put lights on it?
Oh, yeah. We have to use a 6-foot ladder to maybe make it 2/3 of the way up. This is a funny story. I'm like, Mom, make sure you put the star on the top, because they were helping out when we picked up the tree, and she's like, yeah, no problem. So we get the tree up, and then all of a sudden she peeks her head out and goes, oh, I guess it's too late to put the star on the top. It was just such a hectic, like crazy effort to try to get that damn tree through the doors and then up. It was just crazy. But yeah, you can only decorate 2/3 of it. It's just not safe to get up to the top.
Do you feel guilty, like, taking a tree? Like, I feel like if a tree has spent that much, like, time and effort to grow, it's like a big old tree, like, and then you're taking it. Like, do you feel any guilt?
No, because I've made an effort to actually repurpose them and cut them up and stuff for next season. But I understand that fully. But yeah, I mean, trees are trees. They provide us wood and heat, and thank God for that.
All right, so you'll cut it up and use it for firewood?
A tree that size, yeah, for sure. I would feel worse getting a smaller tree, like your typical 6-footer or something like that.
Got it.
But these larger trees, yeah. It's a really neat farm, too. It's right on 175, heading towards like Woodstock. And this man has planted, he showed me his little private special lots. He put 300 little seedlings in, I guess you would call them. And after about a year or so, they're only like 3 inches high. So it's a really neat process. And this guy, I asked him if he had a strategy, like, do you have to plan ahead? And he just sort of wings it at this place. But it's amazing. It takes a good amount of time. Mm-hmm. This tree is 30 years old.
Wow.
We counted the rings. So 16 feet tall, 30 years old. Beautiful, beautiful trees at this place. But he has nothing under like 12 feet at this farm at the moment.
Wow.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Well, Christmas at the Stomps is looking good.
A big tree farm.
Yeah. But anyway, back to Insta. Yeah, if you want to see some weird stuff, just check out our Insta page. It's always interesting up there. Eclectic.
I keep trying to, like, I feel like every once in a while it gets like too many those like coffee post or
the donation things,
text post, and so I always am like I don't like more than 3 in a row, so I put like a mountain picture in there every once in a while,
just to bring it back to earth. Yeah. No, I hear you. What are you doing on Facebook lately? You just trying to sort out your buddy hike?
Yeah. I unfortunately, I think with the incident with Emily Sotelo, I was back in like the Facebook groups and all that, so I think it's sucked me back in. But yeah, I'm trying to organize that buddy hike, and we're going to do a deep dive later on about an incident that happened down south around hiking groups and how they can go sideways. So I was sort of like comparing this story that we're going to talk about later on the show with how we're going to organize the group hike and all that stuff. So I think
that's a good call.
I'm definitely taking a little different perspective than this guy that we're going to cover later.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all good. I'm excited. We're going to get out on January 14th, and then we're going to take a crew over to Reklis, which will be fun afterwards.
Yeah, I gave them the warning. But like Steve didn't even flinch. like they're ready.
Perfect. So
Yeah, I think the capacity at the Pint House is over 100, so there'll be room.
oh yeah, we'll squeeze in.
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
All right, Stomp.
Looking
So
forward
you've
to it.
got some notes here. So you were taking a look at some of the show metrics. So we wanted to give a shout out to the top 5 downloaded episodes. So
Yeah.
number 1 is the first episode, which I think makes sense. I think a lot of people sort of sample it, and then half of them go away and say we're never going to listen to these two clowns ever again. But we've definitely gotten a lot of traffic for that. And then the 4,000 footer episode, which was our second episode. So we did get a little bit of people sticking around, and then. After that, our Rescuing Odin the Dog, which was episode 11.
Number
That's
3.
our third most downloaded, which I think that was the one that popped us, I would say, for the show. People finding out about us.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that was a big moment for sure.
Yep. And then number 4 on our top 5 as far as downloads go is the intro to Winter Hiking, episode 32, which was Karen Washington joined us for that episode, and I think there's a lot of appetite. Obviously, people want to know about winter hiking. And then number 5 was the one and only Eric Todd Sweet, episode 54.
Yep.
Very good.
The ETS
Yes.
made it to number 5. He's in the top 5.
Mr. Popular. I saw him and Danielle were up hiking on Womback today.
Danielle Maple?
Yep.
Oh, interesting.
When worlds collide, right?
I guess so. I miss Danielle. We keep on chatting about doing something soon, but just 2 ships in the night, as they say.
Yeah, she's been doing all kinds of fun stuff. But so I don't think we've reached like any huge milestones, but it was fun to look at the top 5 shows just in case anyone's curious. Again, Franconia Ridge, number 1, 4,000 Footers, number 2, Rescuing Odin, episode 11, Intro to Winter Hiking, episode 32, and then Eric Todd Sweet, episode 54. So if you're going to be bummed out that we're not going to have episodes over the next 2 weeks, then you can go back and listen to those shows if you're interested.
Yeah. But I think we might have reached influencer status.
You think?
I think some people might disagree. No, this is really interesting. I think we got an email after Keith Gentili, who wrote the book White Mountain State, and apparently he attributes a bump up in Amazon to number 4 to showing up on the show. I thought that was like, holy moly, that's pretty interesting. Right. I think it was in the backpacking charts, which I didn't even know existed.
Getting real niche. He was great.
Wasn't he?
What a fantastic listen.
Yeah, he really was.
Yeah.
It was a fun time.
Yeah, he was great. Sarah was great last week. Steve, you better bring it to we got a lot of good guests lately.
I know, I'm following up some real home runs.
Oh yeah. We had a lot of follow up with Sarah too, and big takeaway was this idea of varied movement patterns being the key to health and injury avoidance. And I don't know, I threw this in here, but CrossFit's a good option. I know some folks that do CrossFit.
A lot of folks, yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, my cousin Danielle, she used to own a CrossFit gym in Wakefield, and then she moved out to Hawaii, so she's doing CrossFit out in Hawaii now. But I know that's a really good trend, and Sarah inspired me last week. I'm going to start doing push-ups every morning. I'm going to get jacked.
Oh boy. Your goal is what, 50?
Yeah.
You got to crank out 50 of those puppies.
Yeah, I can do about 25 pretty easily, so I think maybe 100 eventually, but we'll see.
Wow. 100, that's ambitious.
Well, eventually, maybe in like a few months. So,
oh man.
I may add that as my New Year's resolution. Like usually I'll do something stupid like I'm not going to put any clothes in the hamper inside out or something stupid like that, but I may do something physical now.
I have that on the list here. So that's your New Year's resolution. Push-ups.
I'm going to have to, yeah.
Do you have any, Steve?
No, not yet. It's not usually something I do.
Contemplate?
Yeah.
Huh.
But maybe you've inspired me. I'll think of something.
Yeah. I'm thinking too. I don't know. I'm excited for you to check out Baby Monster back there in the gallon, but I'm thinking of
oh yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Right.
Yeah, we can check it out at the beer section. I'll let you see what's going on, but I guess my resolution is to become a better brewer.
Nice.
It's pretty fascinating.
Well, you got a good start, so
I hope so. It was challenging, believe me.
I mean, doing it, man. That's the first step. So.
Yeah, right. But we will check it out.
All right. So then you're going to get into brewing, Stomp. That's your New Year's resolution. I'm going to be doing push-ups. And then, Steve, you're still figuring it out.
Shame.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll figure it out. You guys are like on the opposite end of the spectrum.
You're probably right in the middle.
Right. Well, Mike's going healthy. You're going not healthy. Not a healthy habit, making beer.
That's funny.
Well, it's a good thing you got a lot of friends you can give it away to.
That's so great.
All right. So moving on to sort of pop culture, miscellaneous, what are we into right now discussion. So, Stomp, you put something on here, $7 for an AI image of you. What is this?
Have you seen that?
I've seen these. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going around.
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's like a computer just draws an image of you based upon what you upload to this program, but it's an app. And what I found interesting was you have to pay $7 for these pictures. It's like, why didn't I think of that cool gimmick?
Yeah, and I think we are, and I want to record this just so that I have it on the show, because I had actually done a post on my Facebook, and I almost never do. I usually just do hiking stuff, but I actually posted about this. But AI, I think we've crossed the Rubicon. Do you know that saying? Like, we've crossed like...
Oh, of course. Yeah, Caesar.
Yeah, so we've crossed the Rubicon into a new sort of golden age of technology. So I think as I've grown up, like the internet obviously in like 95, 96 was a huge deal. When iPhones came out, I don't know when that was, maybe 2009, 2010, that was probably the next big deal. I think the third big deal actually happened last week, which is there's an organization called OpenAI. It's a company that released a version 3.5 of their AI tool, which is called ChatGPT. And this is going to change the way that we live our lives. It's going to change the way students deal with their homework assignments. It's going to change the way teachers deal with education. It's going to change the way programmers do code development. It's going to change everything. So ChatGPT, I'll just give you an example of, I just basically, all you do is just type in, like, you download, it's a website, you just type in, like, okay, I need a recipe to cook lemon herb chicken tonight with vegetables. Give me a recipe. And it just pops it right out. Then you can tell it, like, hey, make me a shopping list based on this recipe. Or you can do multiple recipes and get a shopping list. You can tell it to write HTML code to build a form to track weather. You can tell it everything. It's unbelievable. You can write an essay on Paul Revere. It's unbelievable. So we are in a new world right now. So I just wanted to get it on the podcast to call it out that this is such a huge thing, so that we can reflect back on it maybe 2-3 years from now and say, remember when Mike was all excited about ChatGPT and he was right?
I went into the link that you sent out, wherever that was. I think it was Facebook, and I checked it out, and it's all text, correct? It doesn't read back to you. It's all text. So you're reading it? It's
all text, but you can basically, like, you can put in, like, I'll give you an example for work email. Like, if you say, you got to write an email on a certain task, like, you can basically just say, write me an email on this topic, include these 3 bullet points, and then hit enter, and it'll generate an email that's, like, really well structured grammatically, and you can just cut and paste that, boom, send it off. So I think what'll end up happening is that we'll go from writing full documents to just basically giving it bullet points to say, like, create this document based on X, Y, and Z.
We're headed towards WALL-E. Remember WALL-E, the Disney film with all the people floating in the pods?
I saw that article that you posted, and I got to be honest, I stuck my head in the sand. I was too afraid to click on it and read it.
Yeah, it's moving way too fast.
It is.
Exponential.
It is, yeah. So anyway, we'll see. I mean, you could even, Stephen, you could even say, like, create a beer recipe for me, and it'll give you a recipe, and you could give it components of what you want the beer to taste like, and it'll generate a suggestion for you.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Maybe that'll be my New Year's resolution. I'll be a little less afraid to read scary articles.
Yeah. Yeah. You could release a Reklis AI beer.
Oh, that'd be a nice line.
It would be. So anyway, still, Stomp, Stomp, you want to do this? You want to talk about Twitter?
I want to skirt around the edges, yeah, because I think it's important. I mean, if you think about, let's start with this. It's a good segue. Elon Musk, he's deep into the AI and everything else. Isn't it amazing to see him go from the star to like hated and like trashed by the collective hive mind out there? I just think it's fascinating because it's all surrounding the whole Twitter dog thing. I don't know if you guys are up on this. Have you seen any of this?
Yeah, I see bits and pieces.
It's fascinating. So, I mean, Matt Taibbi and Elon, they're releasing all the internal docs from Twitter. And I don't want to get into it personally because we're a quote-unquote hiking show, but I think it's really worth looking at because there are some incredible things going on that really do put the First Amendment into focus and the relationship between government agencies and private companies. And I think, I'll probably leave it at that, but it's fascinating. I think it's probably going to be one of the biggest First Amendment cases of our lifetime, without question.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I read a little bit of this. I'm more interested from the perspective of sort of looking at the inner workings of how Twitter works, just to compare it to what I know of sort of working in the tech industry myself. And a lot of it lines up with what I would have expected to have happened during that time when they were really dealing with the transition from, President Trump to President Biden. Ultimately, I think a lot of this stuff is just sort of a litmus test around like people that sort of believe that, they want more intervention when it comes to social media. They're going to say that this isn't that big of a deal, whereas the ones that are like, I knew that all this intervention was happening, like this is the proof I needed. Like I think everyone's just sort of like going to be happy. But Twitter has always been just a cesspool to me. Like I can't make heads or tails of it. Either way, regardless of who owns it or what the current tone is, it just to me is a bunch of like media people just talking to each other, and I just shut it down.
Yeah, well, check it out if anybody's interested.
Okay,
it's shaping up day by day to look like a crime scene.
Very good. Yeah, very good. So, moving on. Am I reading this right? You're just starting to watch The Sopranos on HBO.
Yes. Have you seen any of those, Steve?
No, I never watched The Sopranos, no.
I mean, when did this come out? Back in the 90s?
I think
probably
early 2000s.
Really? Okay. See, I don't even know that. But anyway, yeah, I'm hooked. So I'm binging it, and it's fantastic. It's funny. I always come a few decades late to these cultural things that I remember back in the day, people were just amazed at this series, and it's actually really good.
It's a fantastic series. HBO, I mean, the basics really with HBO, I would say Sopranos, The Wire, and Entourage. You need to, if you haven't watched those three series, like you have to watch those.
I tried The Wire, and I sort of bonked out around the second episode. I don't know what it was about it, but I should give it another go.
I would give it another go. Yeah, it's to me.
Okay.
I think of those series, like I still think Game of Thrones, and I like the fantasy series, but I'll set those aside. I think for the drama series, long form, I would say The Wire number 1, Sopranos number 2 for me.
What's going on in your cultural world, Steve?
In my cultural world, man, nothing super exciting, nothing super highbrow. Wife and I just finished the Netflix show Wednesday. It was fun.
Oh,
it was a little corny sometimes, but
different.
Yeah,
Tim Burton though.
Yeah, exactly. It looked nice. It was easy watching. But who knows? I mean, we're one of those families where we got HBO because of like the Game of Thrones craze and blah blah blah. But I think we still have it, and maybe that's a New Year's resolution. Maybe I'll go back and watch some of those shows that you're recommending, Mike and Stomp.
There you go.
Yeah, I definitely would. I got to check out Wednesday. I've heard. I mean, my impression of it's a little bit different. Like, I always thought that the Addams family, like the attraction was that they were the freaks that get dropped into the sort of normal school environment. But it seems like she's in school with like other freaks. So I don't know how well that plays out. But I've heard mixed reviews. But I'm excited to check it out.
I thought it was worth the watch. It was fun. Yeah, it's kind of like a Hogwarts situation where everybody in the school is abnormal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. A couple other things here. We don't have to get into them much, but Avatar 2 is going out soon, or is it already out?
I don't know.
I'd like to see it. I would like to see it on like an IMAX or something like that. And then We have the Swift fans are getting another chance at tickets through Ticketmaster. I read this morning. So I guess select people with certain grade of ticket purchases from the past attempts are going to get another shot at getting another ticket. So
I didn't hear that, and I'm interested in that.
Yeah.
My wife's a Swiftie. I spent 2 days in the trenches.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Okay, read the article. It's everywhere now. It was this morning. Apparently that's it. It's like 4 prior purchasers. They're opening up a lot or something to that effect. So.
Fingers crossed. That was supposed to be a Christmas gift, so we'll see.
Oh, so no, you tried to get them and you couldn't get them, Steve?
Yeah, I could not get them. It was the most frustrating thing I've ever been through. No, that's not literal, but yeah, it was awful. It was a very frustrating time.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah, if anyone's listening, by the way, and they want to give, like, forget about Steve, but if you want to give Taylor Swift tickets to me so I can get them to my kids, like, let me know.
That's right. You got one, right?
We have one that got tickets, and then I got 2 that, although my youngest one, she's told me she wants to go see somebody at Fenway. It's a country, Morgan Wallen, I think. She's like, I just want Morgan Wallen tickets, but the other 2 want Taylor Swift. But one of them has a ticket, the other one doesn't. So,
you know what else is big? Phantom of the Opera is closing. I believe it's like, it was supposed to be February, but now they're sort of bumping it later into the spring. Okay. Like, it's definitely a money-making racket, but that might be a cultural moment, the closing of Phantom on Broadway.
I feel like that's the equivalent of like Kiss going on their like farewell tour. Like Phantom of the Opera is always closing.
Be. Yeah, sure. Yeah. And that's just New York. I don't know if it's closing elsewhere, wherever it's hosted. But interesting stuff. So you want to do some coffees?
Sure.
We have a couple here. Emily donated 2 coffees, and Kathy C. Donated 3, and both were very complimentary and about the podcast. And thank you guys for listening, and thanks for donating to the podcast.
Who called us Click and Clack?
Click and Clack, I think, was Kathy, if I remember correctly. I'd have to look back. But do you know what that is?
Oh, yeah. I was so honored. I was like, oh, my God. I can't believe it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. It prompted me to go listen to a few older episodes and whatnot, just to see, like, that's an interesting comparison. But yeah,
I thought it was a perfect comparison.
Yeah, clever.
I always the Click and Clack. Like, it's such a, like, my dad's name is Mick. Well, he's Frank, but he goes by Mick. So it's such a Mick McLaughlin vibe. Like, I remember, like, just driving in his car, and he would listen to Click and Clack, and we would actually laugh. Like, some lady would call up, and she'd be like, "There's water shooting out of my muffler. What do I do?" And they would just go off for like 15 minutes just making fun of the car. I love that show.
So the only difference is we don't take live callers. Maybe that's
that would be a really cool show,
wouldn't it?
A live caller slasher show.
We'll have to get the tech know-how on how to do that stuff. We're so old school.
We could try that. I have a feeling that like Shandy would be first on the line, and we wouldn't be able to get her off the phone.
Oh, we have on line 1 through 10, Shandy.
Oh, I'm just kidding, Shandy. All right, so welcome to the Sounds Like a Search and Rescue podcast. This is episode 86. So this week we are wrapping up the year with a visit by Steve from Reklis. I think this guest invite is mostly just a scheme by Stomp to obtain some free beer before Christmas, but Steve's going to also update us on the latest on his work with Reklis, his hiking exploits, and we're going to talk a little bit about his podcast, Fantasy Pants. In addition to this fine content, we will be traveling to the great state of Arkansas to cover a story about a hiking group leader who was charged with running an illegal guide service. So I'll detail this story and get Steve and Stomp's opinions on every angle of this one. So all that and some recent search and rescue news. I'm Mike.
And I'm Stomp. Let's get started. All right. And we have a sponsor for this segment, of course, and it's at Reklis Brewing. You'd think I'd be able to do this by heart by now, but where you'll enjoy the best food, craft beer, and fun, just 15 minutes from Franconia Notch, many 4K footers, and less than 10 minutes from the Five Corners. Very, very cool.
All right. So
what you drinking, Mike?
So I got a little story here. So I am drinking Greylock from Greater Good Brewery. Have you guys heard of Greater Good?
Totally.
Yeah.
I've heard of that Greylock beer. Is that the 12%?
Yes. Yeah, it's
Holy moly.
The quad, yeah.
That's the ass kicker.
Yeah, it's
Holy
like, and I
moly.
want to ask you, Steve, about this. But anyway, I was in Worcester this weekend. My middle daughter is back from school in North Carolina, so we had the whole crew. So my middle daughter and her boyfriend, and my youngest and my wife, we all went to Worcester to visit my daughter and her boyfriend, and then her boyfriend's parents actually joined us as well. So we had a whole big crew. Went out to this place called The Fix in Worcester, which is a cool burger place. And my first time meeting my daughter's boyfriend's parents, and they're definitely like beer. They like beer. So we were talking about it, and I was like, oh, I'll have Greylock. But it didn't connect with me that this was like the 12% kick-ass beer, because I've had it before. But I was like, oh, I'll have Greylock just because I went to North Adams, and I like the vibe. So I had a Greylock, and then after we went to The Fix, by the way, this place, The Fix in Worcester, is really good. I would recommend it if you're out there. And then we decided we were going to go to the Greater Good Brewery, which is like right down the street, and then have a round two. So I had already had one Greylock. I had like a lighter beer. I can't remember what it was, but my daughter's boyfriend's father was nice enough to like get me another 4-pack of Greylock. So I'm
Rocking and rolling.
Heck yeah.
plowing through another 12%. But I was buzzing by the end of that. I had 2 beers, and I was like, this is more than I'm used to drinking.
Yeah, those are potent, but very tasty.
Yeah.
Super tasty.
Really nice.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Greylock. My wife's family is from the Worcester area, so every now and again we'll go down and visit, and oftentimes we'll stop by Greater Good and have some beers.
Huh.
Yeah, I like it down there.
Yeah, and one of our listeners, Justin, he's going to kill me for not messaging him to tell him to meet up, but I had the whole family and it was a whole thing, so I apologize. But next time I'm down there, Justin, I will ping you. But Stomp, I don't know if you've dealt with this, but like, have you done the whole boyfriend meet the family and all that stuff? It's kind of weird. Like when the boys start showing up, it's like the first 3 or 4 months I just tolerate them. I'm like, okay, you're here, you're around, but I'm not going to get too connected. Then they start getting like,
Yeah, I hear you.
then they start getting familiar, and you start having like conversations. So I think with this one, my oldest one, Caroline, we went hiking and all this stuff. So I think he's, it's just a weird dynamic how, they start becoming part of the family, and I'm like, I'm kind of attached to these kids now. Like you can't break up.
Did you give him the Tony Soprano talk?
Stomp. I'm like 5'7". Like, what am I? Half these kids are like twice the size of me.
Oh, you should start practicing.
Yeah, I'll have to. But anyway, so it's been a fun weekend. But anyway, I'm drinking Greylock. That was a very long time. But Steve, the question I have for you is 12%. Like, what is that? How does that happen that you have 12% in a beer? Like, you can definitely taste the alcohol, but like, what do they do from a brewing perspective to get that much alcohol in the beer?
Well, there's a few different ways you can do it. I mean, the first way is just a huge mash. The more grain, the more sugar, and depending on the temperature that you mash in at, you can make that wort, that unfermented beer, more or less fermentable. And then in later stages, I mean, you can just straight up add a bunch of sugar into the boil, and that'll all ferment out and become alcohol, and you can get something pretty potent like the Greylock.
Is there a preferred technique to make it, to keep it smoother?
Yeah, there's dry hopping really can, especially late, is a really great way to add sweetness that will mask that alcohol flavor. So it's just a balance between bitterness and sweetness, and you can add different hops at different times at different temperatures to produce a sweet flavor instead of a really bitter piney flavor. And especially for some of our big IPAs, that's kind of our favorite method to hide that alcohol burn and give an appearance, or not an appearance,
A cloak.
a cloak. Yes, exactly. A cloak of sweetness over the alcoholic burn.
Bravo.
I mean, it is good, but you can definitely taste the alcohol. But anyway, Greylocks.
Looking for synonyms over here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, there's really only, I mean, when you're talking about 12% alcohol, that's really like wine, and there's really only so much you can do to hide the booziness.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, but Worcester, I
Wow.
would recommend if anyone's going to check out Worcester. Like, I feel like that city is going through a renaissance right now between the breweries, the restaurants, the whole vibe. It's like it's not the scary Worcester that you used to know in the '90s. It's really nice, and it's definitely worth checking out for a day.
Will do.
Okay, Stomp, what are you drinking?
Well, Steve brought a few things here, but right now I'm having the Stallion, which is a Belgian triple. And it's 9%, and it's absolutely delicious.
Here it's chaos. Rocky, you went the distance. You went the 15 rounds. How do you feel? What are you thinking about when that buzzer sounds for that line? What you thinking about when the 15th round?
Yeah, it's my style. It's a little bit sweeter.
Yeah, I've heard you talking about some of the higher ABV, sweeter stuff, so I figured that sounded like a good pick, and we just canned that one last week, so nice and fresh.
Good stuff. You're missing out, Mike.
Well, when you do the edit, can you do like a horse neighing sound when you said stallion?
I can do that.
Thank you.
I picture the mane and tail shampoo whenever I talk about the Stallion.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Are you having the same thing?
I am, yeah. I grabbed the same can.
So you brought something else as well. Maybe you can throw one of those other ones my way.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So I also brought one of our double IPAs, 30,000 light years.
Thank you, friend.
We call
that's
it that
awesome.
because it's brewed entirely with galaxy hops, and the distance from here to the edge of our galaxy is 30,000 light years.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So a couple high ABV beers. Nothing like what you've got, though, tonight, Mike.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. I was hoping to get your input on the Baby Monster homebrew that I put together with Mrs. Stomp.
I can't wait.
We can do this on air. We'll just do it sort of visually, briefly. So right down here to your right is the 1 gallon clear glass jug.
So Stomp, let me just set this up for the audience so they know. So Stomp and Mrs. Stomp created their own beer. I don't know what they're up to, but they did this like, what is it, 2 weekends ago, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, it was like 2.5 weeks because it took about 3 days for it to ferment, and the whole process with the tubing coming out of the gallon into a cup for the bubbling to release the gas.
Yeah, you want gas to be able to get out without anything else getting in.
Exactly. So it was all sterilized. Hell of a process, Mike. Super sterilized.
So basically, he's got like put that jug so I can see it, Stomp, but you have like a jug
Sure.
full of this.
It should be fine here. I'm just going to lift it up. Can you see that?
Yeah, it's like this hazy liquid with some white stuff on the bottom, and it's got like a tube. Basically, looks like it looks like a pea jug. You know, hikers will relate to that.
Mad scientist.
Yeah. So,
well, it's interesting. What my question's for you, Steve. Just looking at the color, this was an American Pale Ale. Mm-hmm. So this is like a orangey yellow, but there's a lot of sediment at the bottom. Does this look anything like what it might be in a couple of weeks?
Well, it'll probably clear up in a couple of weeks,
Really?
especially if at this point you take it and you put it somewhere that's cooler.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's wintertime now, so that should be fairly easy. I mean, you don't want it to freeze.
Right.
But if you can get it somewhere as
Down
close
here.
to freezing as possible, I mean,
Okay.
like if you can get it down to, the low 30s,
I can do that.
then it'll clear up.
Okay.
And I mean, the tough part is the bottom of that jug
Sediment.
is flat and wide,
Yeah.
opposed to something like we would use in a commercial brewery where it's conical.
Yeah.
And there's a spout at the bottom, so you can pour all of that off.
Okay.
But now it's kind of stuck in the solution there until you get it out. But
Well, you know what they have you do? Have you ever done one of these kits?
I haven't done a homebrew kit.
Oh,
no.
dude, Mike and Steve, this is hilarious. So this is a siphon. So you essentially establish a natural vacuum siphon, and the little rubber stop at the end is about 1/2 inch deep, and it prevents the sediment from getting into the suction. So you suck it all into a separate container, and then from there, that's going back into the bottles.
Or
It's
alternatively,
really interesting.
Alternatively, you could take that stopper off, use the siphon. Oh no, it's probably too thick. It'll get stuck.
At the bottom.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's the problem. Anyway, next Friday is actually the day we're supposed to pop it open and transfer it.
I was thinking about it, and when we make an ale, it's usually about a 2-week turnover time. So I was looking back through our texts and I was thinking like, oh, it's been about 2 weeks, maybe a little longer. I wonder if it's ready.
Yeah, I don't know.
Get it cold, let it get cold for 2 or 3 days.
All right,
Yeah.
you got it. Yeah, I mean, the only time I turn the heat down here in the studio is when people come over, so I can do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, just keep it in the Woodpecker studio. It'll be like mid-30s, no problem.
Exactly. Well, thank you for the input. I'll let you know how it tastes when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear.
What would happen if you drank that right now? What would it taste like?
Just warm, flat beer, probably.
Really?
Ooh, yummy. Okay.
Well, I'll let you guys manage the whole creation of beer. I got other nonsense I'm up to. It seems like fun, but I'll drink
It is
yours.
fascinating to taste it at different points in the process. It's kind of just like when you're cooking, you're always tasting something and trying it and say, oh, maybe it needs a little more salt. And I mean, age is kind of the salt sometimes. A really young beer, you can taste that it's not mature enough yet, and it needs more time, and it needs a little more love and attention. But next time you're making it, I suggest trying it throughout the fermentation process. It's kind of cool. You can taste the sugars going away. When you first taste it, it's just super sweet and it's gross. But
yeah. One last question: with that tube capped and cinched, is pressure building up like to create carbonation, or is that?
Yeah, but that little rubber stopper that's in there, I think that would pop pretty quick.
Okay.
Especially where there's not a lot of headspace in there.
Right.
That pressure would build up pretty fast.
So that's how you guys develop the carbonated aspect of it.
That's a lot of it. We do use a lot of natural carbonation, so we watch the fermentation, and we kind of figure out the point where, okay, we know where it's going to end. We know when it's going to stop fermenting. We know where it is right now. So if we close the blow-off tubes, and we capture that pressure, we can build up natural carbonation. And then if there's any more room to be made up, then we'll just artificially carbonate it just through literally a stone that has all these teeny tiny little holes. You blow gas through it into the solution, and that brings it up to the carbonation level that you want.
Gotcha. It's amazing. It's so complicated.
The gold standard is to get the natural carbonation.
Yeah.
It saves money. It tastes better. But
Do you guys ever do any like YouTube or TikTok videos about like making the beer?
Sometimes we do. Our marketing team will come in and say, hey, we want to do a video about this or that. And we have done in the past some educational videos that they post up on social media, but it's not something that we do regularly. I think it would be fun. And honestly, the best way to learn is to teach. So it would make us better brewers. It does whenever we talk about it. So yes, we have in the past, but not frequently.
Gotcha.
It's fascinating to me, but I do enjoy drinking. All right, Stomp. Moving on to recent hikes here. So have you been anywhere? You going anywhere? What's going on?
I have not. The trails are pretty nasty out there, and I've been running when I have a free moment. Yeah. That's all I got. Seriously, the glare ice I'm seeing coming across the internet now is like, nah, I'm just not into it. I'm trying to get into better shape and get my cardio up, so I'm just doing the running more so than anything at the moment. I've been making it up to that Osceola trailhead from Livermore, so that's a good 3 miles up hill, and I'm doing it nonstop.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, Mike, you know this well, how when you first start running, the incremental change every day is dramatic. It's notable, so it's like within a week I was running that whole thing nonstop. It's amazing how quickly running does that for a person. It's really neat. It's measurable.
Keep it going.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's a little tricky now, though. So now I'm like thinking, okay, what do I need? Those yak tracks to get up this, or do I put my spikes on? I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, how about you, Mike? Anything?
No hiking for me this weekend. I was doing the family stuff. My daughter came home from college, and I had the whole excursion out to Worcester. So I've got a trip planned for the weekend. I'm going up to Mount Adams. I think we're going to do either Grey Knob or Crag on Saturday.
Ooh, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be another storm coming in too, I think, at the end.
I think Friday.
It looks burly up there.
It sure does. I think every time you've gone up there, it's been like that.
I don't know. I looked at mountain forecast, and it looked like it was going to be one of those days where it was going to be clear on Saturday, but it was going to hit 50 miles an hour. So we'll see. I think we're staying at Crag. So if anyone's up there and you're at the cold cabin, you may see me.
Nice. You got anything under your belt for hikes lately?
Not a lot that's super notable. I did go out to, actually my first time on Chicora this weekend.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and the ice that you're talking about, yeah, we
For
experienced it firsthand. Yeah, for sure. It was pretty gnarly.
Pretty sketchy. Did you do what trail? Champney?
No, we went the other side. We went up Liberty and should have come down Liberty, but decided to try Beeline. And then there's a split where there's Beeline is off to, the right if you're descending, and there's another one that's even steeper, goes along the river. It kind of goes straight down the middle. That was our original plan. We obviously bailed on that one because of the ice and opted for the longer route.
So was that notable, huh?
Oh, for sure.
Did you see many other people on trail?
We saw 2 other groups as we were leaving the summit, and that was pretty much it. 2 small groups.
I hear you, man. I don't know. I'm like at this curmudgeon phase of my life between the price of the spikes and the fear of getting injured, which at my age would really be a bummer, or like, let me loosen up my hip replacement. No, I just can't do it. I'm just being cautious.
At least for most of the time, we were able to hit that sweet spot where you could have 1 foot on the shoulder of the trail and then 1 foot on rocks.
Boulders,
Yeah.
Hopping boulders.
Especially on some of the rock slabs coming down. Like we totally skirted around. Yeah, there was a lot of time in the woods.
Yeah, I feel like this is the time of the year. At least it's like the snowpack is not so crazy that like if you do have to like veer off trail, like you're not going to fall in up to your hip. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like there's
exactly.
nothing. But I'm almost thinking like, I don't know what you guys think, but like, am I going to have to bring? I mean, I'm looking at the storm, the forecast. It looks like a couple of inches of snow on. It looks like about 5 inches of snow on Friday, and then another inch or 2. So I'm almost thinking I may need to bring. I'm wondering if I need to bring all 3 of the like snowshoes, crampons, and microspikes. If I can just.
I doubt it.
Because it gets dicey on Adams. That like Randolph Path and Lowe's and all that stuff you can need crampons sometimes.
I'm just looking at, thinking of the pictures I've seen over the last 3 or 4 days, and it's pretty bare up there other than those, little jaggedy spots of ice.
Yeah.
But I think that storm coming in this weekend is going to be pretty significant.
Like 4 inches plus up there?
I think
above?
so. I have a buddy who's a meteorologist, and he said that the eastern side is going to get hit a lot harder, but there is still potential. And that's the thing about storms is, they could be forecasting it up to the minute, and then that night, all of a sudden, something changes, and the west side gets hammered or something. But
what's the high temp going to be? Do we know?
It's like it's almost consistent for like the next, like from Wednesday all the way to Saturday right now. And again, this is mountain forecast, so take it for what you will. But it gives like a farther out forecast and some higher summit. But it's saying like 20 degrees, and then basically the wind chill is just going to oscillate. There's going to be more wind on Wednesday, Thursday, into Friday, and then the wind completely dies on. I guess I was looking at the wrong forecast, but I guess the wind completely dies on Friday night into Saturday.
So probably no chance of that, like sort of warmer, heavier, wet snow, putting a nice blanket on top of that ice, which I like. I mean, I'm a little more confident when that's the case, but be careful out there, Mike.
Yeah, it'll
be careful.
Cool. I was trying to I'm going with my friend Jonathan, who like taught me all the ways of winter hiking, but I was like, oh, we'll go to Grey Knob, let's get up there early. And he was like, no, we want to stay at Crag. And I was like, do we really want to stay at the cold camp? But he does.
You gotta do it.
hats off.
It's going to be
And
cold.
for listeners that don't know, I mean, Crag has what, an indoor wood burning stove?
No. So Grey Knob. So
Or is that-
for we've talked about the Randolph Mountain Club before, but there's 2 huts that are like on the like northwest side of the mountain, and there's Grey Knob, which has a caretaker, and they run a stove there, not so much to heat it up, but they run the stove to just keep the humidity down, because they'll get like 40 hikers in there, right? I think.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Yeah, so they have a sleeping area up top, and they run the stove, and you can sleep there. I mean, my issue with Grey Knob is that like you're sleeping on top of each other. You do need to bring earplugs because people will snore, and you're climbing over people if you got to get out in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom or whatever. So it's noisy. Crag Camp is down probably about a half a mile away, right on the shoulder of King Ravine, and the only thing is it's not heated. There's no stove. The caretaker comes down to collect. I think it's like $20 or something to stay for the night, but otherwise you're sort of on your own, and that probably sleeps around 20 people or so. And it's nicer because it's less crowded, but it's cold.
Yeah, I miss that, especially this time of the year. It must be really nice.
I mean, waking up in the morning and looking out at King Ravine, if there's a nice view, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Like the one and only time I ever did that in this colder weather was Carter Notch Hut. Yeah. And I actually didn't stay at the hut. We actually just planted a couple tents, maybe a tenth of a mile away from the hut, towards the eastern side, and it was a nice time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's challenging. It's a big learning curve camping outside in the colder weather.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we got the cabin, so I don't need to bring a tent or anything, but I'll probably bring... Yeah, I mean, I got my 0-degree bag, and I got a sleeping pad. I may bring a little extra just because I was pretty cold last time.
Wow. Well, we look forward to the report.
Yeah, report back after the new year.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So we have other listeners here doing some pretty notable hikes. And if you want, you can tag SLASR on your adventure to be considered for SLASR's Hike of the Week. And no guarantees you'll be plugged on the show. That's a little disclaimer. Vicky takes a hike. Pulled off a 24.5 mile Hale to Bonds traverse. Pretty epic. Emily Thompson requested a shout out for Kyle and Kathy for a double grid finish. So Kyle and Kathy, congrats. Mike, why don't you give them a very cool, very cool.
Very cool, very cool. I saw that though. That's crazy. Good for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sharpen the Sword made it up to the Kinsman's and Lonesome Lake. Nice work. And then Full Strength Coffee. Jeff, I didn't know this guy was so prolific, but he did Hale, which is 46 out of 48 all time, and then 45 out of 48 for 2022. Does that mean that he's done 45 hikes in 2022? That's what I think that means. So if that's the case, congrats, man. That's pretty epic. Like. That's a lot of walking, brother. So those are the notable hikes, and they're all notable. Everybody gets a prize.
Yeah. I have one notable hike that I wanted to call out, and I actually meant to do this last week, but I guess I'm the resident 52 with a view fanboy here, but Ken McGray, who he wrote the guidebook on the 52 with a view. Definitely pick up his book. I'll link it in the show notes, but he had posted an update that there's a guy named Zachary Porter. So Ken runs the 52 with a View Facebook group, and he had posted that there's a hiker named Zachary Porter who has completed his 52 with a View grid. So basically hiking each of the 52 current peaks in all 12 months. So he finished up his final hike on McGalloway. So he's the first to accomplish this as far as Ken knows. So it's pretty impressive. And this guy, shout out to Zachary because he's like a frequent updater on New England trail conditions. So you've probably seen his trail reports if you're doing 52 with a View hikes.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yep. Very cool. Very cool.
Very cool. Super very cool.
For SLASR's Guest of the Week. Very cool. Very cool. Very, 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 very cool.
All right, so moving on to our next segment here, Stomp, we're going to do a little catch up with Reklis Steve.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a couple sponsors before we do that. We have Spinner's Pizza, family owned since 1994, specializing in Italian thin crust pizza. #1 in the region. So it's just off Route 93 at Dascombe Road. And you can visit Dolls and Pops and tell them you want your sticker. Or go swimming with the fishes. Have you fixed that link yet, by the way?
I did. And as a matter of fact, I checked that link and it was correct. So I don't know what you're talking about with New Jersey. I don't understand.
It depends on where you were looking. There was one link that took listeners to a strange place, and we were getting the comments from listeners. So I didn't do my due diligence and find out exactly where, but
we have to.
I would assume it was.
I think it's. I think I got the right one.
Okay, fair enough. EMS, your Northeast go-to for outdoor gear, guidance, education, and more since 1967. Check them out at ems.com. So yeah, we have Steve back, and we sort of do this like twice a year or so, just to more or less catch up with Reklis and see what you guys are doing, and dive into beer craft, which is always fascinating, and we always learn something new. And you also have some. Oh, you were just recently married, right? You weren't here when you.
Yeah, that was in May of this year.
Were you? Did you come here and talk about that last time, or no? I don't think you did.
No, I don't think here. I might have been at home doing it.
Yeah.
I think a couple times I've been remote.
Well, let's start with that. That's actually really nice.
All right.
Yeah,
okay.
let's do it. So give us the deets.
Well, the deets are that May 21st, my wife Rachel and I got married at this cute little place. Ooh, I'm forgetting the name of the town, but it's called the Old Mill. It's down in Massachusetts, in the sort of central Mass, Worcester area. Really cute little restaurant. They've got like a duck pond, these nice little rivers. So it kind of felt like being at home. It was very basin-esque. If you've been up to the basin, sort of.
Oh, sure.
But with a down home, almost Cracker Barrel like sort of feel. Really nice. We picked May because it was kind of like that was the first weekend before in-season rates kicked in, and we thought it'd be nice and cool. But it topped out over 90 degrees that day.
Wow.
So very unexpected. It was a hot wedding, but the ceremony was very fast. I jumped the gun and said I do before my brother, who was our officiant, even finished.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so very anxious to marry Rachel, I suppose, and that came out subconsciously.
Yeah.
Also very anxious to get inside in the AC and get on with the party, even though it was May. Obviously, day to remember. It was a lovely time, and Rachel and I have been having a blast with married life.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. Now, did you have a connection to that central/Berkshire region of the state?
Well, that's where Rachel has a massive family. Rachel's mother is one of 11. So it made most sense to get married down there. My joke that I tell lightheartedly is that the only thing I wanted out of the wedding was to get married in New Hampshire. So we compromised and didn't. And I think Rachel gets annoyed when I say that, but no, it was a lovely wedding. I was very happy with our choice of venue.
That's fantastic.
But yeah, that was to be close to her very, very large family, so it wasn't so much travel.
Did you have a lot of folks from the North Country travel down?
Yeah, definitely. I had a few friends. Kyle from Reklis was able to come down. I even had some friends who used to live in the area, down in Florida, came out. It was great. I saw a lot of people that I'm still in touch with, but I haven't seen in a little while, which is, a really nice part of social media. Even though we don't live in the same state, we can still be in touch. They say the rule is, if you haven't seen somebody in a year, you don't have to invite them to your wedding. But it's different when you're talking to people all the time on Facebook or whatnot.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah,
true.
my clan was able to come down as well from northern New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, did you guys tour the area, or did you do it like a honeymoon sort of separate? Or the reason I ask is because I'm the biggest fan of that part of the state. I know this is more sort of central-ish, but the Berkshires to me is just like my favorite place on earth.
No,
Greylock and everything. It's amazing.
We haven't been over there. I haven't done a whole lot of hiking down there.
Yeah.
And I've been meaning to get over to Greylock. It hasn't happened yet. I've done Wachusett and stuff like that because that's just a short drive from where Rachel's parents are. So we go visit sometimes. I'll be like, I'll pop over to Wachusett.
Weathertop. It's literally Weathertop, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Stomp, if you're going to go out to Greylock in that area, like, I'm your man. I'll take you out there.
I've never hiked it, but I'll get to that in a sec for sure. I've driven to the top, but I want to hike it just for my dad. It was a plan. When my dad passed, he was a huge Tolkien fan, and there is a section in Greylock, State Forest that is called the Hopper. I think we talked about this ages ago, but it's a section of uncut old first generation growth
on
trees
Greylock.
On Greylock.
No way.
He was always fascinated by it, the Ents and the whole thing with Lord of the Rings and Tolkien. And after he passed, I did a lot of research, and there is actually a section of Greylock Reservation that's called the Hopper, but I don't think that's the actual place. So if you look on Google Earth or some of these other topography apps, you'll see sections that could very well be the original uncut lots of growth all around the mountain. So I'm fascinated to go out there and do some research and some exploring.
I would
Pretty
love to
neat.
go check it out. Let's go find the Entwives.
No kidding, right?
Yeah,
No
maybe
kidding.
they're on Greylock.
That very well could be. So yeah, that's my Greylock story. But otherwise, it's just a beautiful region. Stockbridge, Tanglewood. I mean, it's just Pittsfield even. I haven't been out there in so long, but
No. Pittsfield, no.
no, dude,
Stay
Pittsfield.
away.
Here's the one thing for Pittsfield. Pittsfield State Forest is a campground. And you actually have campsites at the top of a mountain, and there are mountaintop ponds that are up there with views that look towards Vermont for hundreds of miles.
Wow.
So there's like this little gem in the middle of Pittsfield. Long story short, I was actually camping out there for 6 weeks when I was going for my PT degree. So I had to do a rotation at Pittsfield Hospital. And I camped for 6 weeks.
Wow, that's a whole lot of camping.
It sure is, but it was like the cheapest way out, and I wasn't into it at the time. I'm like, yeah, what the hell? So yeah, I just love it out there. But anyway, back to you, my friend. So, married life, man, how's it been so far? Good.
Loving it. Yeah. Well, I mean, Rachel and I had lived in sin for quite a while, anyway. So we already owned the house together before we got married.
Yeah, it's good though. Yeah.
Yeah. So not much has changed in that regard. But loving it. I just lost my silicone wedding ring a couple days ago.
Oh no.
So I've decided that if it doesn't show up before Christmas, I'll just get a new one. I only wear the gold ring on weekends or nights out or stuff like that for this reason exactly. Whether I'm at work or if I'm out in the woods, I don't want to bother losing it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So before we get to the other news about the podcast, any other things you want to talk about or mention, or you've been busy with search and rescue for sure, which is super cool. Thank you very much for all your help.
Yeah, doing my best as far as that goes. Whenever I'm available, I like to go out.
Yeah.
I almost feel like you're fishing for something and I can't pick up on what it is.
I had added a topic at the end of the show to talk about that connects to the Willard event. And I guess the question is, do you want to do this now, Mike? I think we could.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think without getting into details of any particular missions or anything like that, how do you as a volunteer manage sort of the stresses that come along with being a volunteer and some of the stresses that may accrue after a mission,
Sure.
things like that?
Yeah.
Because it is it's an important topic, but I think it's a topic that's sort of popping up more and more.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing is that the community, and I say the community, I mean several different things. The community meaning my own personal community, my friends and family, the community, the hiking community, and then the team itself is really like its own little family. So that alone is really like a trifecta of support. You can see the love. People reach out. People ask how you're doing. I feel okay for as far as that stuff goes. The team is great at providing these debriefs. We can all sit down. We can all talk about it. Members from the team will reach out. We'll get together, sit down, have a beer. How you doing? I feel fine. How about you? Oh, well, this is bothering me. It's a really open, understanding group of people. And like I said, that's on several levels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's a complicated topic, but it's super important to mention it. And I just felt like bringing it up just because you are so active and involved in that community, the search and rescue.
I guess, obviously, we haven't really done a deep dive into the Emily Sotelo rescue. We're probably not going to do anything until after the new year, but I think that there's probably a lot of people that are on search and rescue I was thinking about this, like, why did that rescue impact people so viscerally? Well, maybe some other situations haven't. And I think the reason is that there's always the sort of what if, like, if we had intervened, if we had done something differently, could have things changed? We'll never know. But I think that those open questions will always sort of be out there, and I think it's very easy to sort of question yourself to say, like, well, if not for this, could the outcome have been different? And I'd have to imagine that people sort of struggle with that, even though realistically, if you step back, that everybody that was looking to assist in that rescue was doing everything they possibly could. But I would imagine that it's just difficult to process, and that's why I think that particular rescue situation probably hit harder than a lot of the other scenarios where there are fatalities, where you can look back at those situations and just say that there was nothing that anybody could have done to intervene.
Yeah, it is difficult to process, and it's also really difficult to put in lots of work and not see results right away. In an incident where several days pass and you're putting in hard work every day, that takes a toll. So that's very frustrating. And then at the end, like you said, Mike, when it's an outcome that you're kind of second guessing yourself over, it's difficult to process. Mm-hmm. That doesn't make it easy.
Yeah.
No, not at all. And I think too, the age of the victim sometimes plays into this situation where it's easier to process, I think, where somebody has sort of lived a life, and you can look at their age and say they're a little bit older, and there's always sort of that aspect that we always sort of, jokingly throw out there to say, like, well, so-and-so died doing what they love and they lived a good life, and you can sort of process it much easier. It's much more difficult to do that with a young person, but, it's just, I think time helps.
Well said. Yeah. Now for something completely different. We're doing the full sine wave here. We're starting low, going up, and then down, and then up.
Yeah, how are you going to transition this in post?
Wait till you love this one. Ready? So, 13 episodes in.
Oh, man.
So just so that the listeners understand, because I don't think everybody picks up on this, but Steve from Reklis has a podcast. It's called Fantasy Pants, and it is, we talked about this on the 100th episode, and Stomp was a guest star on one of their episodes as well, but it's a Dungeons & Dragons based podcast where, it's a full immersion into sort of the Dungeons & Dragons. Is it gameplay? Is that right, Steve?
Yeah, we call it actual gameplay. Yeah, so we're not scripting anything. We're just sitting down. We're really just doing what we would do on any other night, any other game night.
Yeah, full improv.
Yeah, we just happen to be recording it.
Yeah, well, the players are full improv, but
yeah, exactly.
Your dungeon master has it all mapped out.
He puts in so much work. My buddy David. Yep, he puts a lot of hours in, and he's not just reading and studying the adventure path that Wizards of the Coast puts out. He's also got a huge homebrew element to it. So he's got to weave those two storylines together, take the storyline as written and insert his own, I'm going to call it genius into it. Mm-hmm. So the juggling that he has to do, and then he has to deal with whatever curveballs us players throw at him on top of it. It's really impressive what he does, and he's always rolling with the punches. You really can't pull one over on David during a session.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just sort of ask you a few questions in relation to the podcast life, because Mike and I do this. We're up on 86 now, 86 episodes.
That's really
cool. What is it, like 2 years, 2.5, or a year? Something like, I don't know. But anyway, it's what's your take on the whole genesis of it? So I don't recall us talking about this, but how did this idea start for you?
So I, unlike you and a lot of other people I know who got their start playing D&D, or no, I'm sorry, not you, Stomp. Mike, you played as a kid. I didn't. So I was always interested in D&D, but I never really saw a path for myself to play it. So my interest really bloomed when I started listening to D&D podcasts, and I consumed a lot of them. And then David ended up deciding that he was going to start a game with some of his friends, and I sat the first game out, I sat the second game out, and then finally he convinced me to join in on one of his games and play, and it was a step outside of my comfort zone, to sit down and do some sort of improv and do a funny voice and make things up like that on the fly. It's kind of it's like a muscle that you have to train.
Oh, tell me about it.
And I wasn't good at it starting off. But it all kind of started just because David and I wanted to be able to look back on all the great moments that we were having. Something really cool would happen in just a regular game. And we said, wow, wouldn't it be awesome if we could relive those moments? So we decided, okay, we'll just get a little USB mic and we'll huddle around a table and we'll just, play our regular games. And then we roped Jeremy into it. And Jeremy had some experience with sound equipment, and he took it to a different level.
That's great.
So that's how the podcast got started, because it wasn't supposed to be a podcast until Jeremy got involved.
Right. Yeah, that's funny. We had quite the learning curve, right, Mike? I mean, we talked about it for quite a long time, and then it got to the point where we just, you attribute it to COVID, Mike. That's probably a good part of it, but same situation. I had all the recording gear and sort of the chops. I had zero chops in terms of the internet back room, and Mike took care of all that, and without that we wouldn't be afloat right now. So hats off to Mike on that.
Yep.
How was that for you guys, building that back room and getting the whole thing together where you actually could post an episode and say we're live?
Well, Jeremy is our Mike. So he dug deep and figured out, oh, hey, we need to do this RSS feed, and we need an account over here and an account over there, and he ordered a mixer and just some of the equipment that he didn't already have from making music. So just like the story really couldn't happen without David, the recording and the publishing really couldn't happen without Jeremy. And I say it all the time. I'm just kind of like running around trying to do and help wherever I can. So someday my workload will be greater as I figure out where I can help the most. But for now, the lion's share of the creative work is falling on David and Jeremy, and yeah, this wouldn't happen without those guys for sure.
Well, I got to say, you and Jeremy have a really keen insight into the improv aspect of it, and it's the theater of the mind, like you said when I joined you guys, and your ability, all three of you, but in particular you two, being on the fly to evaluate this imaginary world that you're in and to make these decisions and to make it even more interesting than maybe even David may have realized is super cool. Which is like, you guys are making content on the fly, Mike. So this is what I find interesting, because Mike and I, it's like, we script it out, and sometimes we'll have a couple weeks worth of guests ahead of time, and that's our content. But you guys are literally doing it on the fly.
It's intimidating, and I'm getting goosebumps just hearing you talk about it.
Yeah.
No, it's very impressive. It's different. It's very different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that like when we first recorded our first couple of episodes, like we had, I don't think our scripts were super tight, and I think over time we tightened up the scripts and we would go by them pretty religiously for the first 20 or 30 shows. Now it's a lot easier to improv, but I don't think that I could just sit down and say, hey, Stomp, we're going to do an episode and we're going to cover X, Y, and Z points and let's just wing it. Like, I definitely go off the bullet points no matter what. So I couldn't imagine like trying to just wing it. Although I guess you just need to sort of, if you're playing D&D, you just need to step away and just pretend like, the podcast piece of it is not a factor, and you got to immerse yourself in the game, and then that's the trick. I think when you're going to do something that's on the fly like that, is just immerse yourself and forget about the microphone.
Yeah, exactly. I think if we put the gameplay first, then we can really show that authenticity, and to a point, we do have those bullet points because David has so much prepared content and information, and then Jeremy and I have to react to it, and that's a little scary and not super easy. But David's a really good guide, and he'll kind of keep us in line, sort of. You know, he can feed us info or prompt us one way or another, just in his exposition.
Yeah. Here's a funny question. I don't know what the percentage is, Mike, but we've had a good deal of guests on, and we've done a good deal of just solo shows, and the responses by people are different depending on what we do. But how have you found bringing in outside parties? I realized you had another guest on recently as well. I don't know who it was, but wasn't there another?
No, not quite yet. Not quite yet.
Oh,
it's just been you so far.
There wasn't a female on board?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. I misread that. I thought she was going to be a guest on the show.
Oh, no. This is a new friend of the show who's doing some artwork on social media for
My
us.
bad.
Yeah.
My bad.
No. She's fantastic. Zara.
Okay.
Yep. Doing some character.
But back to that concept, are you planning on doing more like random guest interactions?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, we're certainly going to want to spread it out a little bit. So the particular adventure path that we're doing is made up of, I think, maybe 10 or 12 different mini adventures.
Yeah.
And we would really like to get guests at least once during a mini adventure. So that's kind of it's not set in stone, but that's our rough sort of way to spread things out.
That's great.
But yes, definitely would like to. I mean, Emin Rath is still out there.
Oh, hey,
somewhere.
He's roaming around.
Yes, we don't know where he is or what he's up to, but
he's in the suburbs of Subsanko, so I know exactly where he is. So just let me know, and I'll press the Emin Rath.
This is your player, Stomp.
Bad luck.
Did you listen to the Emin Rath episode, Stomp?
Of course I did.
Nice.
It was fun. Yeah.
See, I listened to every episode of this show except for the ones that I'm on.
Oh, dude, it's hard. Yeah, I don't like listening to myself, but it was a lot of fun.
Good. I'm glad you had fun. Yeah, we had a really good time. Yeah, you were really excellent to have. I've said it 1,000 times. I'll say it 1,000 more, but yeah, that was a really great night. Yeah, we turned it into 2 episodes. I think it was 9 and 10.
Oh, don't stoke his ego. Don't stoke his ego.
You really genuinely did very well. I could tell you were nervous, but
I did my homework, man. I really did. Yeah. I did my homework. I tried to anyway. But,
you violated your non-compete, Stomp. No more. All right.
Oh, man.
Do you guys want to get into this next segment and talk about this,
let's do
crazy mess of a group hike situation?
Yeah, feel free to join in on this one. This is a hell of a story.
SLASR's hiking topic of the week.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this right now, like, you just need to, like, if you're multitasking and listening to this, like, as an audience, like, you need to just, like, sit down, pay attention to what I'm going to tell you, because this story, like, it has a bunch of twists and turns, so you got to pay attention.
Okay, we're paying attention.
Are you focused, Stomp?
I'm focused.
Okay. Yeah, and there's a lot of generic names. There's like a guy named Jeffrey Johnson, and then another guy named Brandon Thomas. So it's like very confusing, very generic names. But anyway, so normally when Stomp does we'll put the script together, and, Stomp will pull like a lot of the national stories that pop up, and a lot of times I don't even, I'll take a quick look at them and I don't even think twice. But like one of this story that Stomp pulled, I started looking into it, and then I started digging into some of the articles around this situation. So I'm going to cover this story. A gentleman died on a hike that was scheduled through a meetup group. And I started digging into this, and more, it just became like this more and more interesting story that I thought that we could do a deep dive into. So I think I'll start with the headline first. And this sort of just dropped this week. So there was a court case involving a person that organized a hike through meetup.com, but they also have a Facebook group. So in this basically, there was a court trial, so a federal magistrate judge convicted a Bentonville, Arkansas man yesterday on one count of engaging in or soliciting business inside a national park without a permit, and one count of soliciting money inside a national park without a permit. So according to court documents and evidence presented at the trial on May 7th, 2022, Jeffrey Johnson, 47 years old, of Bentonville, led a guided hike to an area known as the Eye of the Needle in the Indian Creek area of Buffalo National River, and accepted at least 4 payments of $20 for service while in the Kyle's Landing parking area of the park. So basically, the guy was an organizer of meetup groups. And as part of that organization, he would charge members $20, not so much to guide hikes, but he would charge it for, I think, membership into the group, and then logistically, I guess just to make sure they're committed to the group. And then also, I think he would scout out different hikes around the Arkansas area. So, I guess apparently it was kind of like a voluntary thing. Like if people didn't pay him, he was like, it's no big deal. So, but anyway, he got charged. And the reason why he was prosecuted was there was a hike on May 7th that resulted in the death of a person that was in his group. And I'll get more into the details in a moment. But basically, he was running this business operation. One of the hikers within the group had hiked with him on May 7th. The hiker fell from about 15, 20 feet from the path into like a pool of water. And this was in May, and the water was very cold. And, they don't know whether or not the person hit their head or whether they experienced shock when they hit the water. But essentially, this fall initiated a search and rescue operation that involved the National Park Service and multiple other area agencies. And in the end, it was 47 different search and rescue individuals that had to respond to this particular event. The hiker was pronounced dead on the scene, so obviously a tragic situation. But I want to hold on the details of the specific hike incident for a minute and just kind of recap here. So again, this guy, Jeffrey Johnson, ran a meetup group. So he was organizing everything through meetup.com, and he would arrange these hikes in and around the Arkansas area. And the area in question here is an area that's called Buffalo National River, which is apparently in Arkansas. It's known as a very challenging hike. It's technically off trail, but I think there's a bootleg trail that goes into this area. So the hike crosses rivers, slippery rocks, waterfall areas, caves. So it's treacherous for the Arkansas area, the Ozarks. So in addition to this meetup group, apparently this guy Johnson runs a Facebook group called the Arkansas Outdoor Enthusiast, and the Facebook group has around 9,000 members. So pretty big environment, or pretty big group for organizing hikes and talking about hikes. So I guess this Johnson guy has been running these hikes for many years, and what he'll do is he'll put up a hike on Meetup. Everybody will sort of sign up, and then he'll meet them there, and then they'll go off for a hike. Like I said before, as part of the access to this Meetup group, there is membership dues that are paid. I think you can pay them through Meetup, or he'll just collect them in cash when he meets people. So the $20 fee gives members access to the group. It covers gas expenses for scouting new areas, and fees to, I guess, be on the Meetup site. And according to multiple people who commented in this Facebook group after the situation happened with this hiker that died, a lot of people are saying that it was pretty common that this $20 fee was not even consistently collected, and that many people didn't actually pay it. So a little more about the Johnson guy. From what I can tell, he seems like he's an admin for this Facebook group. And from what I can tell, he seems like a pretty well-meaning, guy. He's a passionate hiker. But what I can see of him is that he doesn't seem like he's super reflective around, or it doesn't seem like he's taking a lot of responsibility as a leader. He's sort of organizing these hikes, and then everybody's out there sort of responsible for themselves, which I know we've talked about this, Stomp, quite a bit around like meetup groups and Facebook groups and things like that. But, my take on this whole situation is he's very much of the mind like, I'll organize the hikes, but everybody's on their own.
Yep. Assumption of risk approach.
Which, we'll get into this in a little bit more detail, but, I think ultimately like this approach with a large group sort of bit him in the ass at this time. So, he's not super reflective. He comes off a little bit, from my perspective, a little unsympathetic to the victim, and not always sensitive towards any level of sort of personal responsibility that may come with organizing the group. My perspective here is that there's sort of two approaches you can take. You can take the approach that Johnson seems to take, where he's like, look, I'm organizing these hikes, and I'll give people sort of a clear picture of what to expect, but I'm also expecting that they're going to be responsible for their own personal safety. And he doesn't really seem to be, and I'll get into this in a little bit more detail, but he's not someone that's going to, if somebody gets injured or can't keep up, like he doesn't seem like he's the type that's going to be hanging around to help them out too much.
Well, I do believe there's prior history to this person that you'll touch upon.
Yeah, I'll get into a little bit more detail on it, but I think my experience in the White Mountains is I feel like most of the people that organize these meetup groups, and obviously there's variances here, but I do feel like for the most part, like the meetup groups that I'm familiar with, the different groups that I see on Facebook, and then like the AMC type groups, like they seem much more rigid around like we're all going to stick together. I want to vet people in a little bit more detail so that I'm comfortable knowing what your capabilities are. And then I think everybody sort of has this unspoken agreement for the most part around sticking together if something goes south.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, moving on to what happened on this hike on May 7th. So again, this guy was not charged at all in relation to the hiker's death. He was charged as running a unlicensed guide service. So just keep that in mind as we get into the details. So May 7th, Johnson, who again, he's the organizer of the meetup group, and he also has the Facebook group. He schedules a hike for this hike called Eye of the Needle through the meetup.com website. In this particular event, he ended up getting around 30 people to sign up. So Johnson typically uses a no-show calculation or a no-show assumption. So what he said in testimony, I think, is that he usually assumes about 50% of the people that sign up end up not showing. So I think in his mind, it was a little bit of a sort of a heavy sign up, but ultimately I think he was still saying worst case scenario is going to have like maybe 14, 15 people there. In this case, the no-show percentage was pretty much zero, so almost everybody showed up. And in this event, one of the people that signed up was a 46-year-old gentleman. He was a father of three from Springfield, Missouri, and his name was Brad Thomas. All right, so you've got this Johnson guy, Jeffrey Johnson, and then you've got this other hiker, 46-year-old Brad Thomas. So Thomas and Johnson had never met until that day, as far as I understand it. And again, this group had up to this point 30 people that were part of the hiking group, and they were heading down this trail, which is described as it's a 4.3 mile out and back hike on an unofficial trail. All Trails has this rated as a challenging hike, and specifically there's no dogs allowed, and hikers will experience river crossings, waterfalls, caves, rock scrambles, and there's apparently a bluff section, which, do we have bluffs in the White Mountains? I don't even know what a bluff is.
I'm sure we do, but I'm not entirely sure.
Well, one of the most popular, we have Artist Bluff.
Yeah, it must be like just another name for a ledge, right?
I'm not really sure, guys.
Some sort of outcropping, if I had to guess, just by context. But
yeah. So anyway, there's this bluff section that apparently is pretty treacherous. So, and this is the area where I believe the victim ended up eventually slipping and dying during the hike. So, just to recap again, we've got the meetup group. We've got this guy, Jeffrey Johnson, who's the organizer. He's the admin of this Facebook group with 9,000 people. Apparently pretty well liked amongst the community. Then you've got Brad Thomas, father of 3, 46-year-old guy that was joining the hike. They end up heading out on this hike 11 o'clock in the morning. The hike progresses. The group is, there's 30 people in this group. They end up into, I don't know, maybe halfway along or whatever. I mean, for Arkansas, I'm assuming this sounds like one of their most difficult hikes in Arkansas. I don't know how it is an equivalent to like what we deal with in the White Mountains, but it wasn't super long hike. But apparently they got to this rope section, and at that point, Johnson is working with the rest of the hikers to organize group members to get through this particular section. One of the group members informs Johnson at that time that one of the hikers, who turned out to be this guy, Brad Thomas, ended up turning around. So at that point, there's not much that Johnson can do. There was some discussion amongst whether or not anybody wanted to go back and try to catch up with this Brad Thomas guy to see what was happening, but ultimately no one in the group wanted to go back and see what was going on. So the group proceeded to the destination, and at one point, I guess they got closer to where they were going to be going, to this Eye of the Needle place. 2 other people decided that they were just going to stop and wait for the group to go forward, and then eventually they would come back to get them. And then at this point, even more, the group starts splintering. So Johnson is trying to encourage everyone to pick up the pace because there was a group that went ahead. Johnson is sort of working with some of the group to pick up the pace so that they can catch up. Eventually they make it to this Eye of the Needle place, and as they're sort of making their way back, they pick up the 2 additional hikers. The whole crew is coming back through this area. They run into another hiker who warns them and says, look, hey, there's a hiker up ahead that had an incident. They're currently working on this person. They've got CPR going on, and we just want to let you know that this is going on. And I don't think it makes sense for you guys to stick around, like sort of just get your way through it. So I think, and Stomp, I don't know how you guys sort of manage this if you're actively out on rescue and you've got other hikers coming by, but it sounds like basically they were told, like, look, there's an incident, like just put your head down and don't make a scene over it and just move along.
There's different scenarios, but in general, people that are coming are guided around a scene, and you try to manage that as well as you can.
Yeah, exactly.
Every situation is a little bit different.
Yeah. So anyway, so they're doing an out and back. They're coming back. They're tipped off by this other hiker. They end up going past, and then as they're coming back down the trail, they start seeing search and rescue teams heading up the trail. Now Johnson at this point, and none of the group members apparently had any idea that this victim was originally part of their group, which I don't understand how that's possible. I get it, there's 30 people, but I feel like if I'm a group leader, like I'm going to have a pretty good sense of what's going on here. And we'll talk about sort of like some of the things that you can do as a group to make sure that this doesn't happen. But apparently, according to the news reports, they didn't have any idea that the victim originally started in their group, and it wasn't until the next day that Johnson found out that the man who died was part of that group. So I feel like that's pretty bad, right?
It depends. The big empty space here is, what did this guy use to inform these participants? What was on his website, if he had one? What did he provide them in terms of what they should do to prepare? I mean, as we're talking, I'm looking over some of the New Hampshire guiding companies, and they really emphasize the pre-preparation and assumption of risk.
Yeah.
And every state's a little bit different. Jurisdictions are different. In this case, we have a federal aspect because this happened on federal lands with this apparent, transferring of money and this and that. But so there's a bunch of different factors, and that's the one thing I question is how much did he tell them in advance? The licensing thing, the permitting thing. New Hampshire, for instance, you can become a guide through Fish and Game, but it's a little more heavier on the kayaking, hunting, those aspects, but they cover all the fundamentals like compass, first aid, this and that. So it's a deep story, and it really depends on what's happening in Arkansas. When we get to it, I can cover some of the aspects of the negligence and how Arkansas may be approaching this case. But
got it. All right. Well, I think just getting to more detail on the story. Johnson was, again, he was a well-known hike leader in the area. He had organized a bunch of meetups for multiple years, had this group, so he was well-known. So prior to that day, there was another smaller group that was going in to do the same hike. And that particular group had I don't know what the number was, maybe 5 or 6 people. There was 2 photographers that were going. And they knew that this large group was heading out. So they had actually reached out to Johnson over text and had said, hey, I know that you're going out to this Eye of the Needle place with a larger group. We just want to make sure that we're well clear of you guys, and we wanted to confirm that you're still heading out at 10 or 11 o'clock or whatever. So this other group ended up heading out at 8:30. So they had confirmed with Johnson that his planned start time was later in the day. As part of that, they also said, hey, just a heads up, I see you got 30 people signed up. It's not safe to take that volume of people out into this area. Johnson, presumably, I think he just sort of said, yeah, I got it covered. Presumably, I think he was probably still using his assumption of a no-show rate of half, so he probably figured, I got it covered. Ultimately, that no-show rate ended up being, I don't know what happened, but maybe the weather was nice or something, but that no-show rate ended up being way off. So he had those 30 people on there, but this other group had warned him ahead of time to just be hey, just a heads up, it's going to get crazy if you bring this volume. So anyway, this smaller group set out at 8:30. They had a couple of photographers with them, and I mean, how it goes with photographers. You're not making any fast pace with a photographer, so they're poking along. And sure enough, they make it out to where they're going. As they're coming back, they head into, they're heading back. They run into this large group. Everything was going fine. Some of the folks in this first group had commented. They were yeah, there's. The group had, sneakers on and, not appropriate footwear, etc. But little did this first group know that this guy, Brad Thomas, had already split off. So they're making their way, they passed the big group, they're making their way down the trail. And then, sure enough, one of the members of the second group who was actually had a military background, he was a former Army vet that had done some time in Afghanistan. He comes upon this scene where this Brad Thompson guy had left the large group. Apparently him and a female hiker had made their way down, and this Army guy from the second group hears some screaming going on. The woman that's with Thompson is hysterical. Thompson is face down in the water. The water is ridiculously cold, so they don't know whether this guy hit his head, whether or not he might have fallen and had some shock from hitting this freezing cold water, but he's face down in the water, essentially. And this gentleman, former military guy, attempts to get him out of the water. He's hit with shock when he hits the water, struggles to get this guy going. Another hiker was able to help him out. This guy and his girlfriend, I guess, they start doing CPR. The girlfriend has an emergency beacon that she's able to trigger. Another hiker ends up heading down to the trailhead to try to get some help. So as all this is going on, they're doing their best to perform CPR, and I think it sounds like they performed CPR for a good amount of time. But ultimately, like they just couldn't get a heartbeat going for him, and SAR teams arrived, and eventually they ended up getting there around 5 p.m. Now, again, we talked about this. So Johnson and his crew end up coming up on this scene later on. It doesn't even click with them that this guy is part of the hiking group that they started with. So they're just moving along, heading down the trail as the SAR team's coming up, and eventually they got to do a carry out for this guy, right? So this is bad enough as it is, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So he was sent down by himself. Is that correct?
He wasn't sent down.
Turned back.
Something happened during the hike where Thomas and another lady decided, they were like, yeah, this is too much for us. I don't really know what the background is or what the motivation is for Thompson on why they decided to turn around, but him and another female hiker decided they were going to turn back.
Okay, so they were together at least.
They were together, yeah. So there was like, the feedback from the Facebook group is a lot of people were basically like, Thompson decided on his own without telling anyone that he was just going to turn around, right? And then he just did his own thing. He was, this other lady was there, and a lot of the people on Johnson's Facebook group are sort of like, Johnson's not at fault, Thompson is at fault because he didn't tell anyone he was leaving. He just decided on his own that he was going to turn around. I don't know if he couldn't keep up with the other crew, whether he was sick of it, whether he wasn't into it. I don't really know the details, but ultimately,
so the leader didn't know.
The leader didn't know that he turned around, but the leader also didn't implement a sweep in the group to cover the back of the group either.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. You guys picked the wrong guest this week. You should have asked a lawyer to come on. There's a lot going on here.
There is.
I mean, you think about what would happen to you or I if we invited 5 or 6 friends out for a hike and somebody got hurt. But then it gets so much more complicated where this guy was collecting money.
Yeah.
And then it gets even more complicated when he doesn't have a license to be doing something that he, I would guess, needs a license to do.
I did a lot of digging into that, and I'll get into that. I do have one thing I should add now, Mike, as we go on with this, because I think it's actually helpful for people listening to this story to think about this. In Arkansas, in terms of negligence, like, if somebody like this guide has a duty to provide a certain level of care to his group of people that are hiking with him, Arkansas applies what's called contributory negligence. Some states are different. They're comparative negligence. So in this situation, it's a threshold. So if, say, his estate, his family wanted to sue for damages and try to, right the wrongs here, with contributory negligence, you're looking at a threshold that has to be met. And if, they look at both parties, and let's say it's 50%, if they don't reach that threshold, they get nothing, as opposed to a comparative negligence state, which will look at the relative responsibilities of both parties, the hiking guide and the person that turned around and ultimately died. They would look at the contributions, like, oh, did he go off trail? Oh, did he not tell the guide he was turning around? So it would be a relative type of thing. So there is a chance in a state like Arkansas that if you brought a suit, it could just get tossed out because you didn't meet that threshold.
So are you talking about a civil suit or a criminal suit?
A civil.
Civil. So yeah, because that hasn't been played out at this point. Like, we've only had the criminal aspect go on right now.
Well, that's the federal level, yeah. And I do have some information on that, but we can wait on that.
Yeah. Well, so now wait, there's more. So there's more to the story as we go on. There's going to be more, so I'm not even close to being done with this. So
wow.
A little bit more context on this one is the prior week, Johnson had led another meetup group, apparently in the same location. This particular group was a smaller group, but Johnson had organized this hike, and in this particular hike, a female hiker injured her knee. When that happened, Johnson separated from this hiker, and apparently the hiker injured her knee, told Johnson that, like, yeah, I injured my knee, I'm not going to keep going on, the hiker that injured her knee had her husband was also on this hike. Johnson, the husband, and the injured hiker all sort of conveyed with each other to sort of figure out what to do. The hiker was like, I don't want you guys to lose out on your opportunity to do this hike. I want you to keep going. Johnson then tells the husband, like, okay, here's what you need to do. My understanding from reading this, and this hiker that injured her knee actually posted in the Facebook group, she 100% is backing Johnson on what actions he took on this. I actually don't agree with her on this, but basically what she's saying is she's like, look, I injured my knee. I didn't want to ruin everybody else's day. My husband was with me. Johnson and my husband sort of got together and figured out what to do. And the ultimate solution was the lady who hurt her knee, her husband was going to hike out to the trailhead. I don't know if there's like no cell phone connection or what the deal is, but somehow the husband had activated a request for search and rescue to go out and carry this lady back, right? The lady's on Facebook saying, like, I don't blame Johnson at all. Johnson just went off on his hike with the rest of the crew. Well, the husband went back to figure out the search and rescue situation. So Johnson separated from this hiker. The husband coordinated the search and rescue response to get her out. And again, the lady was on Facebook basically defending this guy, saying, like, I told him to do that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the cult of personality around this guy's group from what I read. But to me, like, this one is bad. Like, I don't care what the circumstances are. Like, if you're going in a group hike, whether you're the organizer or whether you're part of that hike, I think if somebody gets injured and they've got a knee injury, you don't keep going on that hike. Like, everybody stops, and then there's a plan to work to get her out of there as best you can, ideally without activating search and rescue. But Johnson decided he was just going to go on that hike, which I think this is the original sin which caused the entire situation to happen for him, because search and rescue was pissed off, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more. They knew who this guy was. They knew that he was organizing these hikes, and after this happened, the week before, and then they've got a second situation happening where a gentleman died, law enforcement was pissed, and that's why this guy got basically charged the way he did.
Interesting.
Yeah. So as much as the victim is saying, like, it's fine, I made the call, I think Johnson had a responsibility to be a little bit more considerate of the situation and help to sort of get her out of there if he could.
Yeah. But see, in my mind, again, it goes back to the whole negligence thing. To me, the question is, did they have enough to risk taking him to court on negligence rather than letting it be a permit issue? Because it's strictly permit and exchanging of money now on federal lands, which is a federal crime.
Yeah, they got him on a technicality, I think. So a couple of other tidbits just to sort of factor in here. So going back to when Brad Thompson was, had died, when Johnson and his group were hiking back down, somebody from the Forest Service or the rescue personnel had indicated to Johnson that it was illegal to run a hiking business in the forest. So
that's what I was going to talk about.
It sounds to me like search and rescue or the Forest Service knew who this guy was, knew about the incident that happened the week before, and then had called this guy out during that rescue of Thompson. I don't really know what the deal is there, but certainly they were on to this person. And from the perspective of the Forest Service and law enforcement, regardless of whether or not this guy was simply just an organizer to these groups or not, they were perceiving him to be the one that was sort of putting people at risk out in the wilderness and causing them to have to basically activate search and rescue activities 2 weeks in a row with one fatality.
Right. That's outrageous.
Yeah. So a couple of other tidbits that I have here is that in Thomas's gear, there was some alcohol found in, I'm assuming in his backpack. It's unclear. They did do a toxicology test. I was digging around. I didn't find any info about what came back there, but there is the potential that Thomas might have been drinking a little bit, but I don't know exactly what the detail is.
See, that goes back to the contributory negligence.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the next thing that came out here is the sheriff in that particular area. He put out a Facebook post on his personal Facebook page, which was interesting. So this is Sheriff Glenn Wheeler of Newton County Sheriff's Office, and he put out a press release that I can only describe as scorched earth. And I'll give you the highlights. So basically, Newton County Sheriff Glenn Wheeler said his office was notified by National Park Service dispatch on Saturday, May 7th at approximately 4:55 that a man had fallen from a bluff near Eye of the Needle in Kyle's Landing. Initial information was limited, but Newton County deputies, National Park Service rangers, Mennonite Disaster Service, Harris Fire Department, Mount Sherman Fire Department, Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, North Arkansas Regional Medical EMS, and other volunteers responded. So these crews had to hike in where the man was located, and they discovered other hikers had started CPR. Emergency crews continued the CPR for over 2 hours, but it proved unsuccessful. Sheriff Wheeler said the man was part of a group being led by a man from Bentonville, Arkansas, that was discovered to be operating a guide service without a license or insurance, and this was not the first incident the illegal guide had been involved in recently. Wheeler said, quote, "This man brings people to the Buffalo River and other parts of Newton County and takes them into some of the most rugged terrain in the Ozarks. It appears they don't always know what they're getting into. Just last Saturday, a person he was leading was injured and he left her in the woods. We responded with a full rescue team who put themselves in jeopardy to help her, just like they did with Mr. Thomas. They do it because they love it and have servants' hearts, but none of that never would have been necessary if this man had not led them into areas that was possibly beyond their preparation levels. Then to leave an injured client is just absurd." So Wheeler said, he's working with the National Park Service to determine the best course of action. His perspective is this man has a responsibility to these people. He takes their money, then leads them to places without any kind of license, insurance, or emergency plan, and when something goes wrong, he just bails on them. I'm working with our prosecutor's attorney office to see what recourse we have, and Park Service personnel is speaking to the U.S. Attorney's Office to see if federal charges would be more appropriate. So it goes on. I'll include it in the show notes, but this is like absolutely scorched earth.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Just to tie a few knots here, a bluff is a steep headland, promontory, riverbank, or cliff. And apparently in federal lands, U.S. Forest Service, they utilize a CUA, which is a commercial use authorization, which allows an individual, group, company, or other for-profit entity to conduct commercial activities and provide specific visitor services within a national park, which can range from guided mountaineering, backpacking, bike tours, etc. So that's probably leading into the federal legal action here.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, but that sheriff, clearly, he was like, I know what the deal is. I'm going to go after this guy. And just as a reminder, Johnson was not charged with any negligence for this hiker death. The case that they put together for him stood on the fact that as part of the $20 meetup fee, he had actually collected this fee on 4 cases on the Forest Service property. So I think even if he had collected this fee outside of the Forest Service property, he might have been okay. But they had 4 situations where members had confirmed that they had given him these $20 fees when they met him apparently in the parking lot. So that's basically what the case rested on, is that he collected those fees, and that was enough evidence for what they needed to prove that he was running an illegal guide service, and that's what got the conviction.
Wow. That's wild.
Right?
I mean, the more we talk about it, the more it makes sense to me in terms of why they're going with federal charges.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when the story first starts, you think, oh, well, well-prepared, experienced hikers can slip and fall and break an ankle or fall fatally. Mm-hmm. And it happens all the time. And that maybe isn't necessarily the fault of the leader of the group. whether there's money exchange or not. But yeah, like you said, as the story keeps going and there are more and more details, it seems like,
Yeah.
man, this is more than just a laissez-faire leadership style. This is just aloofness and I mean, negligent.
Yeah.
At least it seems that way.
Well,
like I said, I'm not a lawyer.
But again, Arkansas is one of the fewer states that has this contributory standard, which is a lot harder to prove than this comparative, which is like a sliding scale, more or less. You know what I mean? So it just makes sense.
Yeah. So a little bit about the hiking community reaction. So I spent a little bit of time. So I'm in this guy's group. So I think the Facebook group is called Arkansas Outdoor Adventures or something like that. So I spent a little bit of time checking out the group, and I also looked at the comments on the sheriff's Facebook post. So I guess what I would say is that the hiking community is very polarized on this one. There's a large population. It feels like there's a little bit of a cult of personality going on within his group. It's a 9,000 member group, but there seems to be a very sort of large population of hikers that are taking the perspective that Johnson has no culpability for the death whatsoever, that and it's almost like it's a little uncomfortable reading some of the comments, but essentially people are falling on the side of Thomas had a responsibility to let people know that he was turning back around, and Johnson has no responsibility in this situation. It's a tragic accident, and there was nothing that he should have done differently. You know, I would argue that in a case where you're organizing a group, like even though I'm not responsible for people from the perspective of like, you know, their safety 100%, but there's basic rules of group leadership or group organization that you need to follow. Like basically you have a lead hiker, you have a sweep hiker that follows people. Those two hikers are the most experienced hikers. You have an agreement that everyone's going to stop at certain intervals to make sure that everybody's collected. You have a group that's small enough so that everybody knows who everybody else is. You have an agreement that if there's an injury or if there's fatigue, everybody's going to turn around and head back. You know, those are basic rules that you can implement that I think 99% of the groups that do hikes in the White Mountains follow those basic rules. But this seems to be, and again, in this particular Facebook group and on the comments I read from the sheriff's office, none of those points were really brought up by the people that said Johnson has no culpability here, which to me, I was pretty shocked that there was that high of a volume. But this was not like one or two people asserting this. This was common across the group.
Yeah, I think if you're out at like the mall with your friends and somebody slips and hurts their leg and everybody wants to continue on and go to the food court or whatever, I think that's different. But yeah, if you're in the backcountry and somebody in your group hurts themselves, to leave them and let them take care of themselves and take all that manpower out of a rescue effort, that's, I mean, if you've got 30 people or even less than 30 people and you come across a carry out, please pitch in. Please don't walk by, because that help is really valuable.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things I was curious about is like maybe it's just a cultural thing where like Arkansas and the Ozarks area is a little bit different. But I have some good friends. I mean, I have a really good Facebook friend who is very involved in that area, and I checked with a couple of people, and they all were sort of the same mind as I was around like, you know, there's basic sort of rules that you should implement when you're doing these meetup groups where, you know, you've got a lead, you've got a sweep, you've got the agreement that you're going to stop at certain intervals, you've got the agreement that you're going to, you know, turn around if somebody's injured, or everyone's going to rally together to get the person out, ideally without engaging search and rescue if you can. So this isn't just like a weird cultural thing that goes on in Arkansas. This just seems to be, you know, a lot of people sort of have hiked with this guy. He's been organizing hikes for years and years, and he's got a lot of friends, and he's sort of made himself known as a good person, and he probably is a good person, but I think that there's a blind spot here when it comes to sort of the culpability around how to behave in a hiking group, regardless of whether you're a leader or you're just a participant. You know, I think that some people are completely clueless and they have no experience, but if you're an experienced hiker you should know how to maneuver in these groups and just have these basic rules in place.
Yeah, I think it's evolving, to be honest with you. I think if more events like this happen, then there may be legislative action. I think my big takeaway with this for listeners and for anybody really is to do your homework, because I think a lot of these outfits, whether it be hiking guides, snowmobile guides, kayaking guides, I think you need to do your homework and look at their resume. Just in my research just tonight while you were chatting, Mike, I did some digging, and a lot of the outfits here in state New Hampshire just pretty much rely on individual certifications like solo certifications, first aid certification, avalanche certification, things like that. And that's sort of where it ends. So I think you should look into a guide service if that's what you're thinking about doing. Look at their resume. If you have a particular guide, dig into that person individually, their history, if they've had any incidents. You got to do your homework, because a lot of these services are straight out assumption of risk, inherently dangerous activities, and you can make the argument that hiking is inherently dangerous, especially if you're on a steep bluff. I can certainly say that that's how snowmobile works. People walk in from some metro somewhere 100 miles away that have never been on a motorized machine, and they sign away their liability, and that is it, and we take them out. So do your homework, due diligence on the part of the participant.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So ultimately, I guess the one argument that I would say to, this guy Johnson, he's on Facebook commenting, I wasn't able to find any situations where he took any level of sort of let me step back and just say here's the things I feel like if I was in that situation, I'd be here's the 5 or 10 things that I could have done differently to fix this. And I would have beat myself over it. I probably wouldn't have continued on running a Facebook group like this, but he's just moving along, organizing hikes. And, obviously he feels like it's a tragedy, but I don't think that he's taking any level of sort of self-reflection on this where, what could I have done better? They're really just, the majority of that group is just sort of looking at it and saying it was a tragic accident, where I think if you're going to organize these group hikes, particularly when you're opening up accessibility to dangerous places, you just need to take some basic rules around how you're going to manage these hikes. And it doesn't mean that you're a guide. It doesn't mean that you're a leader. It simply means that you're going to agree to some basic rules. And those basic rules, from my perspective, are you have a lead hiker, you've got a sweep hiker, you agree that you're going to stop and meet up at a certain interval so that you know that everyone's there. You're going to know who all the hikers are. You're going to have an agreement to turn around if anybody's in distress. And then if anybody's injured, you're going to work together to get that person out as best you can without calling search and rescue unless you've really got an emergency. I think if you follow those basic ideas, then then you can turn around and just say, if a tragedy happens, we did everything we could to mitigate risk. There's none of that self-reflection, I think, in this situation at all.
Clearly. Yeah. Well, this is one to note, and let's do an update as they come in.
Wait, there's more.
Oh, my goodness.
So as of today...
Crack another beer.
Yeah. So as of today, there's a late-breaking update.
Midnight.
So the gentleman in question, Johnson, was notified by meetup.com that his account was suspended because he had been convicted of a crime. So Meetup basically said, somebody notified us that you've been convicted of a crime in relation to, your account, and you can no longer access.
But he hasn't been convicted yet. It's alleged.
He was
correct?
convicted. No, he was convicted as of this week. He was convicted of the federal charges of running an illegal guide service because he collected those dollars.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought those are just charges, but...
And I don't know if there's any plans to do any sort of civil action. Yeah.
I don't... Convicted, you can be charged with a crime, but if you're convicted, you're guilty.
He's guilty. He's guilty of running an illegal guide service. He'll be sentenced in March.
Interesting. So they turned this around fast. What was the date of the incident?
May 7th.
Oh, okay.
I mean, Stomp, I'll send you, again, I'll put the sheriff's press release. I've never read a press release that was so clearly like, I'm pissed off and I'm going after this guy. Like this sheriff was pissed.
No, that makes sense. That's a good several month turnaround. I was going to say, like, wait a minute.
Yeah. So
and
anyway.
like you said earlier, Mike, they really just got him on a technicality, because all these conventions that we have in the hiking community, you know, I think that they're quote unquote immoral to not operate by them, but it's not illegal.
Yeah.
So they got him the only way they could.
Yeah.
By taking money in the parking lot.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty
and
much.
I think it's a
wild.
delicate balance too, because I think there's many hikers that, you know, they're like, oh, these meetup groups or these groups are dangerous and they shouldn't be done. But how are people supposed to learn? Like, I had my friend Jonathan, who I'm going hiking with on Saturday, like he showed me how to do winter hiking. Without him, I would have just sort of stumbled along by myself. Like, if people want to, you know, I just happen to have Jonathan as a friend, but like a lot of people don't have friends. They want to get into winter hiking. How else are they supposed to learn safely? They can leverage these groups. I mean, obviously, yeah, they can pay for a guide service, and we've got some awesome guide services, Northeast Mountaineer, Redline Guide. We've got some awesome groups in the White Mountains, but also, like, not everyone has the money to pay for that. So, you know, what are your alternatives? I don't think that these meetup groups or these Facebook groups are negative overall. It's just there's some risks that go along with them, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like somewhere in between you and Jonathan and 30 other hikers, there's a line somewhere in between those two. I don't know where that line is, but
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I think the line at least starts somewhere around, you know, like I'll give you an example, is like this group that we're organizing for beginning winter hiking through the hiking buddies. Basically, the model's going to be that, you know, we're staggering the times. There's going to be no more than 10 people in the group. We'll have an experienced lead. We'll have an experienced sweep. Everybody understands that, you know, this is sort of learning winter hiking, and we're going to go by those rules. Like, everybody stays together. We're going to check in with everyone. If there's anybody in distress, we all turn around. If anybody's injured, we help out. So I think that's probably the max that you want to deal with, is 10 people, 2 experienced hikers, and then you're heading out. And you got to pick the right hike too. You got to pick a hike that's not going to be too dangerous. I wouldn't take people up, you know, East Osceola.
God. Hey, we're going up the Watcher, kids.
So I realize I'm not exactly here to ask questions, but Mike, did anything change for you with your planning for this hike after reading the story?
I think what changed for me is that I will be much more aggressive and prescriptive about the expectations for everybody. Is, you know, I'm not going to be like, oh, I want everyone to like me, and I'm going to let shit slide. I think I'm not going to let shit slide. Like, it's military Mike.
Pack search 0600. Open up that pack.
Yes.
You have to.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I wish you guys a safe hike out there.
So can we revisit this briefly? So I'm joining, correct?
You're coming, I guess.
All right. So who else is sweeping? Do we know yet, or is this?
I've got
This has been kept a
Julie
secret to
from
me.
the hiking buddies is going to lead. Andrew Barlow is going to be there, and we got a couple of other people. So we're going to
All
split
right,
the
if you need
groups
help,
up.
let me know.
Yeah,
Awesome.
you'll be a sweeper.
Thank goodness. And I'm going to be the guy that like disappears at the back of the line. Where'd Stomp go? Oh, God. No.
Somebody will be doing CPR on Stomp.
Jesus. All right, this next segment is brought to you by Fieldstone Kombucha. New England's premier craft kombucha ships to New Hampshire. Check out Fieldstone Kombucha online for delicious seasonal flavors and a kombucha style beloved of skeptics and enthusiasts alike. The perfect non-alcoholic post-hike drink, shipping available for retail and wholesale. Catch them at Tuscan Village Holiday Market in Salem, New Hampshire from December 8th to 11th, and that just ended. For more information, contact Emily Sheridan at emily@fieldstonekombuchaco.com or visit them at fieldstonekombuchaco.com. And then we have Sweet Beginnings Daycare. It's a New Hampshire licensed child care provider that offers care for children from 6 weeks to 12 years with flexibility in before and after school care as well. Sweet Beginnings aims to instill a love for learning by providing a safe and positive experience within a loving and warm environment. Sweet Beginnings believes this is a good foundation to teach children in order to prepare them for their future. For more information, contact Sweet Beginnings at 603-568-4530 or visit them at Sweet Beginnings Daycare on Facebook or email Shandy at Shandy Elliott with 2 L's at outlook.com.
All right. Moving on to recent search and rescue news here, Stomp. So that was a hell of a segment.
No kidding. Do you want to just do the recent New Hampshire?
Yeah. Why don't we do that? So
Yeah.
there is a injured hiker on Peaked Mountain. Where is Peaked Mountain? That's in North Conway.
I was actually referring to the Mount Willard, but do you want to do Peaked?
Yeah. Is that the one that's in like the Green Hills Preservation, like near Black Cap and all that?
I'm honestly not sure. I know we have a Peaked Hill here in Thornton, but I think it's different.
Yeah, so Peaked, this is in North Conway, so December 5th around noontime. 65-year-old female from Chelmsford, Mass. was hiking with her husband, slipped on an ice-covered rock, and as a result, she sustained an injury to her ankle, which prevented her from continuing under her own power. She was about a mile from the trailhead, so they called 911. North Conway Fire Action Ambulance and the Lakes Region Search and Rescue Team responded. The victim was placed in a litter and carried out to the trailhead, and she was able to get back out around 3 o'clock. So about 3 hours total from the time that she was injured to the time she got to the trailhead. And she was taken to Memorial Hospital in North Conway. And Fish and Game wants to remind everybody that it's winter conditions out there and it's slippery. So be prepared.
Super slippery.
3 hours, she got lucky.
Yep. Yeah, 3 hours.
That was quick.
Not horrible. This next one here is unfortunately, we had a hiker fatality on Mount Willard. So this is a situation where a gentleman and his wife were hiking up Mount Willard, and unfortunately, this gentleman he got a little bit too close to the edge, and they had just reached the summit. They were taking some photos, and unfortunately, the wife heard her husband yell, and unfortunately found him starting to fall. He did end up falling around 300 feet, which caused his death. And unfortunately, his wife was there to witness that. And Mountain Rescue Service had to basically get up there and navigate icy conditions. They had to rappel down to the face of the cliff, and it took about 3 hours for them to get to the gentleman, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. And it turned out that unfortunately, this was a very experienced hiker. Him and his wife were both experienced. The gentleman worked at the Cog Railroad and was a well-known, worker at the Cog Railroad. So I'm assuming that he had likely just wanted to sort of enjoy a nice day off. And unfortunately, Stomp, it's been years since I've been up on Willard. I used to take the kids up there. I used to take my nephew, like me and 5 or 6 other kids. Like I never I never got the impression that there
beautiful.
was any significant danger in Willard, but it can happen anywhere.
It sure can. Yeah. Yeah. My only comment on this is, Fish and Game sent out an update as early as today, and actually December 12th. So for today, that was yesterday. And they just reinforced the fact that they were prepared. And it just, this is appropriate to talk about. I think online speculation as of late has been sort of through the roof on some of these events. And I would just caution people to not enter the realm of speculation when it comes to these events, and let things ride, and not necessarily post about your speculation on any given event, because it just creates a feedback loop which can be vicious and negative and unnecessary and just cause more harm in the end. Just a little minor takeaway there.
Yeah, and I think that I guess the one thing that I would say about this is that I'm very quick to sort of call out and say, like, hey, Mount Willard is the best choice for you if you're a beginning winter hiker and you want to get experience. But I just think we're in this sort of unique window right now where it hasn't snowed a lot. There's been some rain. There's been some, warming and then refreezing and warming and refreezing, and you can build up some ice. So it is a little bit treacherous out there right now. Not saying that this gentleman had traction and everything he needed. It's just a freak accident, it sounds like. But I think people just need to be cautious, even in these areas where you think like, oh yeah, it's relative. I'm going to a particular area that's going to limit my risk. There's still risk involved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, open ledge. Experienced hikers can slip and fall all the time. Whether it's just over a rock and you roll your ankle, or something more like this.
A simple stumble.
Yeah,
Could
exactly.
put somebody in that position.
Could literally happen to anybody. But,
Yep.
heart goes out to the wife, heart goes out to MRS. Those guys are really impressive.
Yep.
Yeah.
And condolences to the whole Cog Railroad family. I think this gentleman worked there for 30 years or so he was probably very well embedded into that family. And some people have a sort of a negative view of the Cog. I've always looked at them as in a very positive light. They're always there to help out with rescues whenever needed. I guarantee you that this guy has been on a number of different rescue missions to help other hikers out in the past as well. So it's just a sad situation.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we had a big show tonight, Stomp. We're going to wrap up the new year with a good show here.
2 hours and 20.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, yeah, it's like congrats on the podcast, and keep us posted, and
Thank
we
you.
will
Thank you.
certainly have you back again.
Good. Yeah, always happy to come on by. And Mike, I realize I didn't even say hello to you. I feel like I'm part of this like parasocial relationship where I feel like I was just talking to you the other day, but in reality, I was just listening to your podcast.
That's great.
Hello.
And,
we should have done that at the beginning of the show.
I know.
And I encourage you guys to set up a campaign for Mike. I know we talked about that, but maybe next time.
I think that would be a lot of fun.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get Mike on the
So
fantasy
nervous.
pants.
Like I can't do voices. What would my voice be?
You don't have to, or you could just do something small. It's really whatever you're comfortable with. There's no pressure. It's just like hiking, hike your own hike.
Yeah.
Play
I
your
actually
own game.
do a good voice of my daughters complaining. So if I could be like a female teenage character, maybe that would work out.
Your mind is your only limit.
That's true. All right. Well, with that, episode 86 is done, and let's put a pin in it.
Absolutely. Happy New Year. We'll see you in 2023.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to learn more about the topics covered in today's show, please check out the show notes and safety information at slasrpodcast.com. That's SLASR podcast.com. You can also follow the show on Facebook and Instagram. We hope you'll join us next week for another great show. Until then, on behalf of Mike and Stomp, get out there and crush some mega peaks.
now covered in scratches, blisters, and bug bites. Chris Staff wanted to complete his most challenging day hike ever.
Fish and Game officers say the hiker from Florida activated an emergency beacon yesterday morning. He was hiking along the Appalachian Trail when the weather started to get worse. Officials say the snow was piled up to 3 feet in some spots, and there was a wind chill of -1 degree.
And there's 3 words to describe this race. Do we all know what they are?
Lieutenant James Nealon from New Hampshire Fish and Game. Lieutenant, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
What are some of the most common mistakes you see people make when they're heading out on the trails to hike here in New Hampshire?
It seems to me the most common is being unprepared, and I think if they just simply visited hikesafe.com and got a list of the 10 essential items and had those in their packs, they probably would have no need